So hello and welcome, I'm Frederick Dunn, and today we're going to talk about these little critters. What are they, you might be wondering? Well, they're aphids. And I'm not sure if you know that much about aphids. I am learning a lot, and that's why I'm right here on YouTube sharing with you the things I've learned, because I've been staring at ants. I keep honeybees. Honeybees are related to ants. Hymenoptera, that's right. And ants do some curious things. These are black field ants, and you might be wondering where they're located. In the northeastern part of the United States, northwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania, right here in my backyard, and it's August the 4th. Now these little aphids are on a very specific plant, and I'm not sure if you understood, but aphid species are associated with specific plant varieties. Who knew? So these are not the aphids that you find in your vegetable garden. These are on goldenrod. Goldenrod is critical to honeybees. So I pay attention to the things that impact our goldenrod here. And these aphids are safe and secure. They're protected by the ants that we see walking around, these black field ants. And the aphids draw in the ants, they entice them, and they feed them. And I'm sure you've heard about it. You've probably heard about the ants and how they milk aphids, if that's what you want to say. But the aphids are actually luring the ants, and then they feed them a little sticky treat. And it's called honeydew. And we are familiar with honeydew. See right there, that little bubble that showed up at the hind end of that aphid to the right? The ants come along, see, it tips up its abdomen, and it's trying to feed that ant, but it missed it. Little aphids are swarming all over. Now watch the aphid in the center here. It's highly productive. See that little bubble there? As soon as the ant turns around and puts its mouth where it needs to be, right on the rear end of the aphid, there it is. See? Took it. And it provides it another one. So now this benefits the aphid. Well, the aphid gets protected by the ant, and the ant gets a sugary source of food from the aphids. But I want you to know more about the aphids, because I've seen some very interesting behaviors here. And I don't know if I can get you to feel bad for them, but they are not free to go, for example. So right here on this goldenrod, these little aphids scoot around all over the place. And I'm not sure if you understand that aphids are live-born. Look at this one, tooling down the side there, a little older, all prickly. It thinks it's going somewhere, but it's not. Because when the ants figure out that it's trying to leave the productive zone where they're ranching these little aphids, they scoot them right back with the others. This is why we find these aphids clustered together in little concentrated areas on the goldenrod. And the goldenrod, when we look at a field of it, it's hard to pick them out, right? Which one has aphids on it? Well, you start to look at those skinny leaves, and when we see the leaves drooping down, hanging lifeless at the side of the center stalk of the plant, then we know something's going on with it this time of year. And that's when we start to look closer, and pretty soon we can see there are little clusters of aphids on there, and then pretty soon you'll notice the black ants scooting around. And notice some of the aphids are larger and smaller than others, the little one that just came down the leaf and joined the main stalk there. Well, they're live born, as I mentioned before, and you might be wondering, an adult aphid. How many baby aphids would that make per day during this time of year? Well, I'll tell you what, with each adult aphid you're looking at, we're talking 3 to 4 live-born aphids per day, per aphid. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but some of those aphids are really tiny. By the way, what are they called when they're really tiny? They're called nymphs. What if I told you that when the nymph comes out of its mother, it is ready to go? Not only that, it also has aphids inside of it ready to go. So in other words, about a week after it's born, it can produce new aphids. It's born pregnant. That's right. Now you might be wondering, how did it mate while it's inside its parent? Well, it didn't have to. They're asexual. So they don't need a mate to reproduce. Doesn't that make it great? Because that means that then just one aphid on one of these stems could produce an entire pile of aphids in a very short amount of time. This is why they can end up taking everything over. But the good news is we have 6 spotted pink lady beetles scooting around just waiting to eat them. They just can't get past these black ant guards. So these are safe. Now, as I mentioned before, when they scoot along and they look like they're about to make an escape, they run into other ants. Now, the ants don't live on the plant. They live in the ground, and they're coming out, and they're protecting these aphids all the time. And when the weather gets bad, which it did at the end of this video, they even scoot the aphids around and get them under leaves and things so they can protect their livestock. That's pretty darn interesting. So, they reproduce 3 to 4 a day per adult. It gets worse than that. There's kind of nightmare stuff going on. I didn't get a video of it, and I'm a little disappointed. See the abdomen turned towards that ant? Look at the antennae on the ant. They touch the aphids to let them know that they're there, and then the aphids move their little abdomen towards the mouth of the ant, and they produce that little bulb of nectar. Now, what if I told you they also don't just squirt that out of their bodies and let it dribble down the stalk of that goldenrod? They're actually holding it until an ant is right nearby. If you notice, looking at them, and we see the ants getting fed over and over again in this video, we never see them miss. They don't just have a little drop that falls out and goes down the stem of the goldenrod. They hold it and they wait until they get an ant nearby. They feed the ant, and this keeps the ant coming by. Now, where does that little droplet come from? Look right there in the bottom. Just producing, look, it curls its little abdomen right to the face of the ant. These ants have it made. But what they're doing is, of course, the aphids are feeding off of the goldenrod, and they need these resources for what? For reproduction, to make more aphids. So this is what they're doing. They're putting their proboscis into the phloem. Phloem it's called, because that's where the nutrition reaches the plant, reaches the flowers, which in goldenrod's case produces nectar and pollen, and the nectar gets gathered by the honeybees, and the honeybees take the nectar home, and they use an enzyme called invertase, and they create invert sugars, and then they convert this all into honey in the beehive. So these ants are taking care of themselves by taking care of the aphids, and the aphids are destroying a resource for the honeybees. But the good news is we have hundreds of acres of goldenrod here in the northeastern part of the United States, and this is a very tiny percentage of them that has aphids like this on them. I had to scoot around and look at a lot of different ones just to find these so I could share the facts with you. So, look how tiny and helpless they are. You may be wondering, well, what about the end of the year? How do these things even get through winter? Well, that's when they're no longer asexual. They'll actually mate. They'll lay eggs. The eggs get parked near where there's going to be fresh buds in spring, and then they'll emerge. What happened here? What is that? These are, by the way, Japanese beetles. They just happen to be out there too, and these two are doing things in public they should not be doing, and of course they're not happy to be videoed. They don't like the paparazzi showing up and following them around, male and female. They try to hide under a leaf. They eat the leaves. They defoliate things. So I'd like to let you know that the Japanese beetle eats the leaves. Look, here's another one. They're competing for this female, these two. They don't seem to be able to get along. They're actually cool to look at. They're not cool to have around. And this is not on goldenrod. This was on another plant. I took a side tour here because I thought if I have to look at them, you have to look at them. And you know, Japanese beetles are kind of simple. Look at the big club antennae. That's how they find each other. And then when you sneak up on them and try to grab one, their defensive maneuver is to just fall on the ground like a lump in the thicket. So, not that interesting. They're trying to get away. But I think you should have to look at them. So there they go. Back to aphids. So we talk about these aphids. Let's look at them. They get older all the time. I think they go through 4 developmental stages. And remember, when they come out of their mother, they are that shape. They're distinctive. You know exactly what they are. When they try to get away, the ants stop them from going. Now here's what I noticed. I was following an ant that was going through the underbrush, and it had actually collected a very tiny aphid, and it was carrying it in its mandibles. That's right. The ant found an aphid somewhere else on another leaf on another goldenrod plant, and it carried it over and parked it alongside this collection of aphids like a bunch of cattle in a corral. Only instead of a fence, they've got a bunch of ants roaming all over the place, and these ants aren't even the same size. You'll notice when you look at them, some of these ants are very tiny, borderline friendly looking, and then you'll see one 2 times the size or 3 times the size, big black ant with big mandibles. That's a real guardian. So they have different names. So baby aphids are nymphs, and then they're just aphids. So, do they carry diseases? I'm sure you want to see that. You want to know. You can see the little scars on the stalk of the plant. They're kind of tan and brown where they've been piercing with their proboscis. And by the way, the proboscis gets right into the phloem and it really reaches way in there. In fact, when you get a side glimpse, oh look, right on cue, walking down here, you can see their proboscis folded up under them, and it runs over half the length of the body of that aphid. It's semi-translucent, and then when they swing that forward and they drill right into the stalk of this plant, it even extends out further than that and reaches around until it moves around the cells of the plant inside the stem until it finds the phloem. Now we look over here on the underside of this leaf on the left, and I want you to notice that's an older one, because I'm sure you're wondering, well, if the ants aren't going to let them leave the goldenrod, then how do they go from one goldenrod plant to the other? Well, they grow wings. And when they grow their wings, they're going to fly away. But the ants are onto that. So what do you think happens? That's right, you guessed it. The ants notice that they're growing wings, and they also know that that means they're going to lose some livestock, and they're not about to put up with losing any livestock, so they chew their wings off. That's right. They prevent them from scattering to other plants. So the ants are helping us control the aphids through their selfishness. So when they're chewing the wings off and they're confining them to one plant to make it convenient for the colony of ants that is providing protection while gathering resources from aphids, they're preventing them from spreading to other goldenrod plants. I've also seen them on milkweed, and that's another variety of aphid, and they look bright orange. Very interesting. And I know you're wondering, what could we be doing to control them? Well, the ants are actually controlling them. Doing a pretty good job of it too. But we've got the lady beetles, of course, that will eat them. There's a wasp that will plant its little eggs inside the underbelly of an aphid. And I can't say that they do that to every species. I don't know if they're species specific, but because I'm interested in goldenrod right now, I wanted you to see it. So, this is what's going on. And the ants are taking care of business. And I'm wondering what you thought was going on here. Look at that little aphid going down there. And you might be wondering how they communicate. They definitely know when an ant is in close proximity, and they're going to feed the ant. Now I want to talk a little bit about the honeydew that they're producing. What is going on? These two are still showing off. I'm sorry about that. They just showed up and there was nothing I could do but video them and shame them into hiding somewhere. Just get going. Anyway, back to the aphids and honeydew. Honeydew's good. Here's why. We're looking at this honeydew that's being produced by these aphids. The ants are getting it. Now, why would a beekeeper be at all interested? Well, because we have relatives of the aphid right now in the state of Pennsylvania. We've got the spotted lanternfly, which does the same thing. See, these ants, they can't get to the phloem and get sugars out of it. The aphids are doing that for them. Honeybees can also benefit from plants that they previously could not benefit from. So when the spotted lanternflies get on these plants and they get into the phloem of those plants and they produce their own honeydew through their hind ends, then the honeybees show up and they think, wow, this is sweet. And honeybees are very smart. They get that resource. They fly back to the hive. They share that resource with other bees inside the colony, and they find out that it's good. The sugar content, the sucrose, is high, and they bring others back. And then next thing you know it, they're all following around the spotted lanternflies and getting honeydew from them. Now, often people say it's honeydew is poo. It's poo from insects. Kind of is, prefer to call it excretion, and here's why. The solids are being held inside the aphid or the spotted lanternfly or whatever else is feeding in this way. And they have kind of a primitive filter system that gets the excess sugars and moisture out of the way so they can concentrate the solids within their bodies that then they use for reproduction. So it's not scat or waste material in the way that we think of it with a lot of other insects and animals. It's actually pretty clear, and that clear little bubble is all they do produce. So they're pretty clean overall, and if the ants weren't there to clean it up, what you would see is a bunch of bacteria because the sugars, when they get out in the open and drip on things, if this were dripping on cars, if you had spotted lanternflies around, for example, sometimes you see that there's black mold all over the place. And that's pretty disgusting looking, and other things don't seem to catch up with it. So if they're not feeding on it, gathering it directly from the rear end of the little aphid or the spotted lanternfly, it potentially could drip on the ground or drip on the plant and cause this black mold. So they're providing a cleanup service. It is a partnership here. And without the ants, the aphids are wide open. I've already published videos showing the lady beetles running around munching aphids. So if they had not corralled them, if one of these little aphids actually escaped and scooted off and found its own stem, a six-spotted pink lady beetle would have shown up because they're everywhere and would have eaten it. That's why we're not seeing a lot of solo aphids. So it seems like they're trapped. Look at the little one lower right there getting fed. It is just a big buffet of sweetener here. So anyway, I hope that this video has taught you something about aphids. I hope that when you look at them, you don't become alarmed, unless you're a gardener and they're all over your vegetable plants. That's a different aphid. Go ahead and get those. But when they're on goldenrod or milkweed, they have ants attending to them, and they're kind of interesting. I hope you'll notice them too. I want to thank you for watching. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this has been The Way to Be.